Um, okay, we're awesome. Thank you, everybody. And the first screen says making PH dreams come true. And some of you might be wondering what PH is. And PH is a short form for passive house, which is something we're going to learn a little bit about today, talk about a little bit today. And it's something that I practice in my design work when designing buildings. Now, oops, a daisy, I've got a problem suddenly. There we go. My name's Kim, and this little statement is about a crisis that we have. Buildings use up to 40% of the energy that we use in Canada. They are the biggest carbon emitting product that we have in our country. And that's because buildings are built to building code, which has nothing to do with how much energy they use. And we all know that we need to use energy to keep our buildings comfortable, and buildings can be built better, and they can and made more comfortable for all of us. I live and work in the Bearberry area, which is west of Sundre and northwest of Calgary. And it was a traditional hunting ground of Blackfoot and Nakota and the Tsuut'ina and Cree and Métis people. This is a view of the valley that I live in, and we live at the bottom of this valley. I surround myself with my grandmothers and my mother and my daughter as inspiration on a daily basis. I've been at this kind of work for a very long time, and this is a picture of me preaching the gospel of passive solar gains about 10 or 12 or something like that, quite a long time ago. I practice passive house design and certified in passive house as a certified designer and a certified builder. I'm a member of Passive House Canada. I'm the treasurer of Passive House Alberta, and I'm the president of Passive Buildings Canada. So this statement, just saying that being energy efficient doesn't have to be complicated. It actually doesn't even have to be expensive. What it really does take is some pre-planning. And so now I'm going to do a little clumsy exchange. I'm going to let you watch a YouTube video, and that is on a different link. So I'm going to switch screens. And we're going to stop sharing this guy, stop sharing that. We're going to start sharing this one. Oops, where did you guys go? There we are. Okay, and here we are. I told you it was going to be clumsy. Okay. Okay. Now I'm going to share my screen again. I wonder, at this point, I've said that I would see if anybody was interested in asking any questions about what you saw, if anybody's would like to comment about what you saw at this point. You could use your hands or put something in the chat. And we can go on with the rest of the presentation. Okay. Let's do that again. Okay. So I'm going to go through some technical stuff, discussing what is passive house. And the reason that I'd like to go through this is because the principles, whether you're designing a real passive house, which has some stringent certifiable components to it or not, these principles are the principles that should be guiding anybody who's thinking of building any kind of building anywhere on the planet. So there's in North America, we have two types of passive house that are essentially used. But the most interesting thing about passive house is that it had its roots in Saskatchewan in the late 80s late 70s. If anybody's old enough to remember, we were running out of oil and gas at that point. And there was a lot of fear in the federal government thought that we're going to have to find ways to make sure that people would be able to heat their homes. So there was some money poured into some research in Saskatchewan in the late 70s. And a German physicist from Germany came to Saskatchewan to learn all that he could about the work that was being done in Canada. This is the Saskatchewan Research House. It was in Regina, I think. And he learned all of the techniques that are used for passive house from this demonstration and from the software that was developed from this project. So there are 5 principles that work together, and these are the most important principles, something like the 10 principles that I had spoken of in the video. But this is condensing it down a little bit. And so the big deal about doing all of this is not only about energy savings, but it's about ensuring comfort and healthfulness within buildings. The first is insulation. And so this is pretty obvious. It's about putting your hat and coat on and doing up your zipper and making sure that the building is bundled up. It's about airtightness. And again, that's about whether the same thing as putting your coat on, whether you have your zipper done up or not. But the more airtight your building is, the more control you have over the interior environment. Thermal bridge free means that, that the insulation isn't just here and there, it's everywhere. So that all of the building has what we call is thermal bridge free. So these are photographs of a building before and after. And the all blue means that there is very little heat escaping from the building just from the windows. But before the renovation, there was an awful lot of thermal bridging going on. Windows are so important. We can make really poor walls perform so much better if they have very good windows. So window selection isn't as simple as just buying the windows that are on sale or the windows that somebody's selling you over a telephone call. That's something that needs to be thought out quite well in terms of orientation and in terms of their quality, and then of course what the budget is. And ventilation. So with this house or building that is all very airtight, we do have to consider how fresh air gets into the building, and that's mechanically controlled most of the time. It's possible to look at ventilation in terms of opening and closing windows, but from a practical point of view, it's good to know that your building can have enough fresh air introduced to it mechanically as well. These images are just a demonstration of how buildings have progressed through the centuries, and going from very sensible housing and mobile housing using local materials and orienting buildings in the right way in order to take advantage of of the sun and make sure that you're not letting the wind into buildings, to enclosing a building with fire, and then getting and progressing to all sorts of mechanical systems. The idea of really looking after the building envelope first means that all of the mechanical systems can be reduced to just what's essential. So it's about prioritizing strategies and that will add resilience. And some of those strategies that add resilience have a lot to do with how the building envelope is treated and how the details are looked after. But it doesn't have to be expensive. Okay, so I'm going to stop here for a sec. I'm just going to stop sharing and just see, does anybody have any questions about what you see? And is there anything in the chat that we should address?
We've got a question in the chat, Kim, about potentially relating to ventilation. So Radford asked or mentioned that he put solar panels on his home recently using the Greener Homes grant as part of it, and asked a question about thoughts on a cold weather heat pump for the Calgary area and potentially areas outside of that as well.
It's a really good question. So yes, there are cold weather heat pumps available. There aren't a lot of people who know how to install them or have experience with them, not enough. But it's certainly that shouldn't discourage anybody from pursuing it. All that means is that the more demand there is, the more people will learn about how to use them, when to use them. Cold weather heat pumps, the problem with them is that they are really designed for low loads. So what that means is that if you have a house that requires too much energy to heat, then you're just having to get too many heat pumps. You'd have to get 2 or 3 heat pumps. If you look after the building envelope first and the windows, then you'll reduce the amount of energy that's needed, and then the heat pump makes sense. So building envelope is such a crucial part of making those decisions. There's heat pump hot water heaters as well. And that is a great choice for hot water heating. And the idea here is that we're electrifying everything. So the heat pump for heating can be electric, and the hot water tank can be electric as well. And both of them use the air for heating, which is pretty cool. It's pretty awesome. And they are, instead of being, most electrical appliances are 100% efficient. Heat pumps are anywhere from 2.5 or 250% to 450% efficient. Did that answer your question, Radford? Awesome. Okay, anybody else? Okay. Tell me if I'm rambling. Sometimes I ramble about this stuff. Okay. Let's go back to this. And there we go. Okay. So what I'm going to talk about is about how to get this kind of work done, whether you're renovating, whether you're building from scratch. There are some steps that you need to take or be aware of when going through with these kinds of projects. So that you might be part of a group that is spearheading affordable housing or multifamily housing as well. Any of those kinds of projects, this applies to any of them. So this is just an image of houses that are just repeating each other down the street. And there's nothing wrong with this, except that these are all code built houses, and all of them will probably be falling apart within 10 years. Their windows will be failing, and or the flashing will be failing, and or the roofs will be leaking. There are all kinds of problems that happen with code built homes. This image I like to use because when you're looking at a builder or what builders can provide for you, often what they do is show you a picture of a kitchen. So this is a picture of a kitchen in a passive house, but you wouldn't be able to tell this house from any other house just because of the kitchen. But this is the photo that you're often presented with. And that doesn't tell you a lot about the things that went into this house to make it more efficient. And that's why I put these pictures in, because the question is, if that first one was a passive house, are any of these passive houses? And the answer is probably not. And there's a lot of reasons I can tell you why they're not. One of them especially is that you can't have that much glass in a dining room and expect it to be warm in Alberta in the winter. So this is just a building flow. It's really a light version of what it's like to build something. But going from design to planning to optimizing to building to enjoying the work that you've done. And the flow doesn't change for a passive house building process, except that the building envelope is different, but the approach to planning is different too. And that's where the misunderstanding, the way that buildings are built, and the way that the building process is done has to change and is not working in terms of building better buildings. So as the owner and the builder, it's really a big deal. You have to be committed to pre-planning, to really planning the project beforehand, and understanding that everybody has to be part of a team in order to have this project be successful. If there's any animosity or there's information not being shared amongst the team members, then something will fall apart. So if it's not the owner that is the kingpin or the person who is sharing all the information, then somebody on the team needs to be sure that everybody's being held together. And if you're paying the bills, then you really do have to be committed to understanding what is going on. It's not as simple as just asking for something and having it presented to you. So the second step is, after your commitment to this project, is to assemble a team. And that can probably be one of the most challenging things that you might do. If you were doing a very intensive project, then you have to engage professionals at the outset. You just can't just pick a plan and then expect to make that into something that is going to work for you and for passive house, although there are some passive house plans that are available. But engaging professionals and engaging a consultant that can help you through the decision making in terms of figuring out the best approaches is pretty important at the beginning. So a typical construction project, you might pick out a plan, you might select a designer architect, and you take the lowest bid. You engage other professionals at the lowest bid, and then engage the construction team at the lowest bid. But the way that any successful project should be approached is a little bit different, in that you select people that are committed to the same goals that you are, and know that you probably will pay a little bit more. It seems like you will pay a bit more, but in the end, if everything is pre-planned correctly, and budgets are considered, it shouldn't cost more, except for the fact that you put more insulation in, which always costs more than putting less insulation in. Planning. So again, the difference between a typical construction project, where there's a design team and there's a consulting team and there's a construction team. In a proper project or project and a team approach, everybody's on the team and everybody's consulted throughout the project. And the plumber is not necessarily making decisions about the finishes, but the plumber is consulted in terms of the right plumbing fixtures, and that part of it can really throw off the entire project. So you can't just uninclude people. Everybody needs to be knowing what the goals are and where we are going with the project. It's just a pretty image of exactly what I'm saying, that we make sure that everybody understands why we're doing something or why we're not doing something. So some things may get dropped because they're too expensive, and everybody needs to be on the same page and understand where the progress of the project is at all times. So more time planning beforehand does take more time to get things in the ground, but it does mean less labor and time and less cost of delivery of a project. I don't know if anybody's seen a project where there's some work being done by one person and 5 people are standing around. And that happens a lot. And that's probably because they don't know what they're supposed to be doing. So keeping your eye on the goal, and there's a lot of reasons for losing the goal, or thinking that the goal cannot be achieved. So one of them is about solar access. So both of these projects are not in ideal spots, and they did take advantage of their south exposure in interesting ways, or overexposure in interesting ways. The one on the left-hand side has high windows on the south side, which is a property line. It's in Squamish. It's really shady in that area, and that window is up really high, and there's an awful lot of solar gains that come in through the stairwell through planting just one window in the entire building. And the window and the building that is to the right is in Victoria, and it also suffers from some shading issues. And also there's a lot of buildings on one small site. So the building in the back, you can see, has a raised portion of the building so that some sun can get into the backside of that building. Sometimes some people hesitate about building some passive houses, and if you do some reading, people will complain about the buildings being boxy. And the simple box shapes are the easiest ones to deal with. But these are examples of kind of boxes that can be made more interesting. And this is the same church. This one building on the left-hand side is a church in Doig River in northern BC. And it's beautiful, and it is also pretty boxy on the outside, but there's an awful lot of things that can be done to make things look more beautiful. These other buildings are in different parts of the world, and they're Passive House certified, so they're very well insulated and they pass the muster. This is a project of mine where we're taking the house that you see on the bottom and making it look like the house on the top. And we're going to improve the energy efficiency of this building so that a heat pump does make sense for it. Right now, it just uses a ridiculous amount of energy to heat itself. So we're over insulating and using better windows. That's really the biggest deal. It's a great shape. It's a boxy project, and we're going to make it look more interesting as well while we're at it. Some of these are kind of technical images, but what this is describing is some of the details that we get into, the nitty-gritty, being sure that we're making the right selections and ways of over-insulating and making sure that windows are performing better than the windows themselves might without some help, and very efficient equipment and interesting windows that open in instead of out. So I'm including this because this wood stove, many people want wood stoves in their houses, and many of my clients want wood stoves in houses. And I do my best to ask them not to use wood stoves. But people feel like they need it because they haven't lived in a house that works for them. And they've lived in houses and buildings that are cold and drafty, and the wood stoves help. And it's not that wood stoves wouldn't help if you were without electricity for a week on end, but the houses that are built to Passive House standards do not cool down for a week, even under the most extreme conditions. So it would take a full week before they start to get to 10 degrees inside. A wood stove can be helpful in those situations, but they're expensive. And they also require 2 holes in the house. They need ventilation and holes for exhausting the fumes, and they also need fresh air for combustion. So what I'm saying with this slide is to say, sometimes if we need $15,000 to get better windows, better spent on the windows than the wood stove. But those are the kinds of conversations that a person would have. And again, just working together, being sure that on the construction team that everybody's respected and that everybody is on the same team. You don't want people on site that are undermining other people who are working on the project, or people who are making excuses about their work by victimizing people, other people who are working on the project. Everybody should be working on the same team. And that any problems, because there always will be problems, are worked out together. And the point of passive house construction, or any good construction, is not to certify, but to build better. And comfortable and healthy and robust buildings, the cost of heating and cooling is minimized. That's such a big deal. And by doing things correctly, the lifetime maintenance of the building is, and the costs of those are minimized over the lifetime of the building. Okay, so just to review all of those things I just went through. So if you want to do a better building, you have to be conscious of what it is that you're choosing to do. And if you don't feel like you have the technical skill to hire people to help you to understand how to get to where you want to be, you have to understand that there will be more upfront costs, and you're going to have people telling you that you're paying too much for some services at the beginning of a project, which is true. But the pre-planning will save you money in the end. Energy modeling is something that has to be done for any new builds or any major renovations in order to get a building permit. So that's part of the building code. And we use energy modeling to optimize the buildings. So it's something that kind of has to be done already. And I like to build on that for buildings that are not passive house level, that are just want to do well. And add a heat pump. If you wanted to add a heat pump, then we can help you make decisions about the best way to approach your building envelope so that that makes sense. Everybody who's involved in the project should be at the table and consulted. Today, I had a meeting with somebody who's going to install some windows in a project, and he was really pleased to know that I would be working with the client to understand that what he's doing is going to be a little bit complicated, going to cost a little bit more, but it's going to be done correctly. And that everyone who's working on the project is committed to good results, and that the project lead needs to understand and speak the jargon. So that's kind of a big deal. If you are the owner and you're not feeling like you're communicating well with the team, then find somebody who can, because sometimes that thingamabob doesn't mean very much to somebody else who's on site. And this last sentence about project participants thinking beyond their own anchoring biases is true about absolutely everybody who's involved in the project. So what you might hear from somebody who has a lot of years of skill, they might say, I've been doing this for 35, 40 years and I've never done it this way. And that doesn't mean that what they've been doing is always that bad, but it doesn't mean that it's right. And it doesn't mean that that person couldn't think about doing something a little bit differently and maybe better. So this is a myth that building better is impossible to get any builder to do, and that's actually not true. As long as you've engaged people who know how to do this better, everybody can teach each other and have better projects. So this is a project for affordable housing in Southern Ontario, and it was an old hotel that was renovated to become an affordable housing building, and it was built by a builder who didn't know how to do this, who consulted with the right people, and it was still built for less money than it would have cost to do if it was built by any regular builder. So these things can be done with the right consultation. Doing building better is a boutique product and only for the wealthy is not the case. These two houses are built by a tract builder in Eastern Canada, but she does build these buildings at exactly the same cost as any code built house in her neighborhood. And then for building, the argument for building better, there's a lot of numbers here, but really what this is saying is that over time, the building will cost less and less and less because the utilities for the building will be less, will be eating away. The lower the utilities for the building will eating away at the original cost. So there's a lot of upfront costs that over time are paid out. Unfortunately, banks and financing institutions don't understand this. We're working really hard to get them to understand this, but you're able to actually pay more on your mortgage every month because your utility costs less. So that's a big deal. Okay, so I'm ready to get started on the next part of this, and I'm just going to stop sharing for a minute. And what I'm going to talk about next is just about the Greener Home Grant and a few other grants. So any other questions that through all of that?
We've got a few really great questions in the chat, Kim.
Okay.
I can relay them to you. So the first one, is there an optimal order in which you would replace or renovate or refit a regular home that was built to code maybe around 25 or so years ago to move towards becoming more of a passive house? So if someone would need to prioritize their efforts, kind of what are the best areas for them to focus on, especially if they want to be budget conscious, they might not have the money to get the full dream team. Is there a way to do that kind of piecemeal or step by step that they can get that started?
Absolutely, absolutely. So from my point of view, the very first thing would be to replace windows. And if you replace them one by one, then that's awesome. But get good advice about the windows. So there's a lot of technical aspects to the window purchases. But to understand that in Alberta, there's no way that you should be installing double glazed windows. They should be triple glazed. There's no reason to save money on doing a double glazed window. And then looking at the ER value or the whole rating of the entire window and looking for the very best window you can. So when we talk about the grant in a minute or two, you'll see that some windows you get a certain amount of money for, and some windows you get more money for. And there's a reason for that. The better the window, the better results you'll get. And one thing to remember is that even with really crappy walls, even with a 2x4 wall that may or may not be insulated, if you put a better window in that wall, you've just improved the performance of that wall substantially and made your house far more comfortable.
Awesome. Thank you, Kim. On that note, do you know of any window providers or people, ways that people can find window providers or types of windows that might be better than others?
So be sure that you will pay more for a better window, number one. So you can't actually build a good window without it costing a little bit more. Excuse me while I just clear my throat for a sec. There are a lot to choose from, that a lot of window suppliers to choose from. One thing to keep in mind is that vinyl windows will cost less than fiberglass windows, which cost a little bit less than really good wood windows. And all of them are good windows. And some of them perform as well. Some vinyl windows perform as well as some wood windows. So you can't really tell by the frames about how well they're going to perform. It's really about how the glass is put together and how that works in the frame itself. Finding a consultant for helping you do that, your energy advisor should be able to do that. So if you're going for a Greener Home Grant, you'll have an energy advisor involved, and they should be able to help you with that. Or someone like me, somebody who's an energy advisor or a passive house consultant should be able to help you with selecting windows that make sense for you. So you can get them from your local lumber company. So All Weather has a very good product, for instance. Inotech is another name that I use often. Inotech is a European style window. And those are both vinyl options. But I think that it's worthwhile to visit the showrooms, learn about the windows. That's part of the commitment to doing something better, and just being as educated about your decision-making as possible. These are big ticket items, so you don't want to just throw your money at it.
Amazing. Thank you. I just got a couple more for you, and then we'll get going. The next one is someone mentioned that they saw a lot of wood on interior ceilings in the photos that you were sharing, and they're wondering if the wood interior ceilings does something in the way of holding heat better, or has a purpose.
That's a good question. I never thought of that. I'll have to look at my slides again. So no, it seems to be that some of the buildings that we have just tended to have some more wood. So the church in Doig River definitely has a lot of wood on the inside of it. And the first passive house that kitchen that I'd shown you, that was something that the client wanted. There's some advantages to, I guess there are some advantages in just hiding light fixtures. There's some issues in terms of holes in ceilings that that I'm not going to address in a lot of detail today, but there could be some advantages to having some wood in terms of installing light fixtures, but no. For the most part, that's not necessary, and it's expensive.
They're just beautiful ceilings, so that's also something, you know, kind of nice to have that. I've just got one last one. Someone mentioned that they are working in residential real estate in Edmonton, and they'd like to be able to recommend designers, architects, industry professionals to any interested clients, and if you have any recommendations for those things.
So it depends on what you're looking for. Probably the best thing to do is to reach out to first Passive House Alberta, and they have members that are Passive House certified. So that would be one place to start. Passive House Canada also lists people who are certified with Passive House as Passive House designers, and there's quite a few in the province. And then when you're looking at the NRCan sites, the certified energy analysts are all listed there as well, and service providers should be all listed there as well. So, so that would be a place to start. And if you wanted to reach out to me, I can do what I can to help you with finding people for the right job.
Amazing. Thank you, Kim. They just said, thank you so much. So yeah, that was great. Thanks for answering those questions, and thanks to everyone that was sharing them. I'll maybe let you jump into the last part of your presentation now.
Okay, so what I'm going to do is talk about grants a little bit, and mostly specifically about the Greener Home Grant. So let me get back into this again. Okay, am I sharing? Looks like I am. Okay, good. So I've got the address, oops, go back, for this site. It's really, if you type in Greener Home Grants or energy efficiency, it's an NRCan site. And on the left-hand side, there's all kinds of links for selecting, getting hints about being more energy efficient, getting energy efficient products, getting Energy Star products, accessing EnerGuide. EnerGuide is a rating that's going to be necessary for all buildings in the near future. I guess I'll talk about that right now. So EnerGuide is what new buildings, if you're building a new building or getting a building permit for a major renovation, you have the option of including EnerGuide as part of that process when you're having an energy analyst look at your drawings and look at your plans. An EnerGuide rating will be something that you will have to get to sell a house or to build a house in the near future. So it's not a bad idea to do, because it helps you to understand where your house stands when it's being compared to other buildings in your neighborhood or other buildings in your house's price range if you're trying to sell it. And so that's done through the process of door blower testing and then analyzing the entire building or the entire house. So the energy efficiency for homes is the link that you would be clicking on for the Greener Home Grant. But some of these other links really help people to understand some of the ins and outs of efficiency. the National Research Council for Canada and CMHC have been at this a very long time. And they were behind that Saskatchewan Research House, believe it or not, once upon a time. And they've done a ton of research. And Canada is at the forefront of energy efficiency and understanding energy efficiency. There's an awful lot of information out there. And they do a pretty good job of helping you to understand in plain language through NRCan, if you get to know the site, about how to do these things and where to go. So when you click on energy efficiency for homes, then you'll come up with the energy efficiency for homes on the right-hand side and learn about some of the ways that you can improve your home's energy efficiency. But it's through this menu, and that is, which link do we click on here? Canada Greener Homes Grant right there. When you click on that, you don't get here, you get somewhere else. But this is one of the other links. Oh gosh, this one was about grants that are available, different grants that are available. So the Canada Greener Homes Grant, on the first page of it, you will see that you can click on some other grants that might be available, and then you can prioritize where you are. And I clicked on Alberta. So these are some of the other grants other than the Greener Home Grant that are available in different places. But all of them do build on the Greener Home Grant. They expect you to have gone through the process that you need to go through to apply and be eligible for the Greener Home Grant. And then there are some financial incentives through the City of Edmonton and the City of Lethbridge and Medicine Hat that just piggyback on that grant. And so the Greener Home Grant means that what you do is you go to this site and you register your home. And this is the first page that you'll see. And this is probably the trickiest part. If you've ever done your income tax online, or if you have anything to do with the federal government, you'll have gone through a portal, either through your bank or you've created your own password. And that is how you access this grant. So you still have to register with the federal government and in order to access any of this information. But once you are registered and you're able to log in, then you can log into the Greener Home Grant portal, and that this is what I'm talking about. So either a sign-in partner, which is your bank, or you have your own GC key. And when you're signing into either one of these, it takes you to the next page, which is through this page. This page is either My Application, which brings you to a site that where you ask for somebody to come to your house and do a door blower test and assess your house. And then they will put your information on the site that says, this is what our recommendations are for any particular house. Or you can apply for a loan application. So the grant is worth $5,000 and $600 to cover the cost of getting the house assessed. So that's $5,600 of free money. And they also are offering $40,000 in an interest-free loan payable over 10 years. So you can apply through this site for both of those things once your house is uploaded. Oops. So this is my own house and my own application. So I had to fill in a form, ask for a consultant. I used Coefficient, but this is a service provider, and you get to select whoever you like, and they'll contact you once you've put your information in, and they'll come and they'll do what's called a door blower test, which means that they check out how leaky your house is. So they put a big red door tent on a door with a fan, and they take all the air out of your house, and then they find out where it's very leaky, and through that process they assess your house. So they look at your heating equipment and the type of windows you have and how much insulation there is, and then recommendations are made. So in this case, this is letting you know what the $5,000 can cover. So it doesn't cover the entire cost of anything. but the grant will pay out $1,000 per kilowatt of a PV array, and it will cover the cost of the exterior walls insulation values. So if in our case, the recommendation was for 2 levels of insulation, and it will cover up to $5,000 worth of the insulation costs. It will cover costs for improving the air tightness of the building, which is something anybody can do on their own. So that would be if after the windows or even before the windows, doing caulking or air sealing around your house is a really great idea. And you can really tell where it's leaky when somebody comes and does a door blower test, and you can identify those locations, and you can do that yourself. Replacing the windows. So you can get $125 for a pretty good window, and you can get $250 for a much better window. And the difference in cost between those 2 windows might be about a couple of $250 per unit. But there's a bigger rebate available because there's an awful lot of knowledge about at Enercan about better windows and how better windows perform. And then replacing your domestic hot water heater with a hot water heat pump. That's pretty low on my list in Canada, or in this part of Canada. In BC and in Southern Ontario, that kind of makes more sense. But a hot water heat pump really, it may or may not make sense, because what happens is that it takes the surrounding air and then it warms up the water, and then it blows out cold air. So when it's blowing out cold air, it's making that room really cold. And in the winter, that doesn't actually make a lot of sense. You can blow it into a room that you want to be cold, or you can seal that room off and make that room into a cold room. But that also, if it's blowing cold air, you don't want it underneath your bedroom, for instance, because it's going to make your bedroom cold. So there's a lot of complications about using a hot water heat pump. When it's installed in some place like Victoria, it can be installed in a garage and it's not a concern. And so it does really depend on where you are in Canada, whether that really makes a lot of sense. So once you've had your house assessed, then you can have this work done, but you really have to wait until the grant, you've applied for the grant, that all of your information's been uploaded, and that you've applied for the loan and been approved before you start any of the work. If you do any of the work before you're approved, that work will not be able to be applied to the grant or the loan. And that is the best grant there is out there right now. There are, in other provinces, subsidies for PVs and add-on grants to the Greener Home Grant. But right now, if you're not in Edmonton or Medicine Hat or Lethbridge, too bad. This government in our province doesn't necessarily support this kind of work. And so this is my last slide, and I'm going to sign off and see if there's any more questions.
We do have a question just about the grant. After the assessment at your house, are you required to commit to the upgrades in order to have their assessment covered, or yeah?
So when you apply for the grant, they make the recommendations. You can apply for, as you have to do the work that's suggested in order to apply to access the grant. So the list that was recommended for our house is pretty much what you'll end up getting. And so you can easily get the $5,000 back by replacing windows. But remember, your windows are going to cost a lot more than $5,000. But what you can do is apply for the loan and the grant, and probably replacing windows will be covered by the grant and the loan, or for the most part, if that's what you'd like to do. If you'd like to add photovoltaics to your house, nothing wrong with that. Getting the loan and the grant for the PVs is pretty easy as well. Those are big ticket items, and those are something that makes it pretty easy to access, maximize the grant and loan. But getting the house sealed, I'm really not sure how you demonstrate that. What happens is that the energy analyst that came and looked at your house to begin with has to come back and ensure that the work is done and document the work that was done. So they'll be able to look at some caulking here and there, but whether they come back and do another door blower test is really the question. And if they're doing another door blower test, what the cost will be is something that you need to negotiate with the service provider. Because ideally that's what you would do. So you'd find out how good a job you would ended up doing by doing a second door blower test. I always think that people know what door blower tests are like. And does anybody have any questions about what that looks like? No? Everybody knows?
There is a question in the chat, Kim, about is there a point in getting your home airtight that you need to look at getting better air exchange?
Yes, that's a good question. So anything under 2.5 at 50 kilopascals. So or 50. So that's an air change that's measured by the door blower test unit. And our aim, if you're building a passive house, for instance, we're looking at getting it to 0.6. So, but if we assume that most code built houses are at 2.5, and anything that was built before 2019 is probably at 3 to 6. And so that's a pretty leaky house. When we're talking about an air change of 6 at 50 pascals, that's about this big. That's a hole that when you take all the holes in your wall, it's about this big. When we're talking about 0.6, it's this big. That's how much airspace is running around the house in different places. So 0.6 is pretty airtight. And that's when we would really want some ventilation. So anything under and close to 1 ACH is really calling for a heat recovery ventilation system. Now, if you're over 2.5 or even at 3, that doesn't mean that you shouldn't have a heat recovery ventilation system. And this is why, because what you're doing is ensuring that there's fresh air in your house always. And having the fresh air in your house means that things that might be off-gassing are mitigated and that the air in your home is healthful. So it's bringing fresh air in, filtered air in, and exchanging stale air for that fresh air, preheating and pre-warming, kind of tempering the air that's coming in, so that it's not quite as cold. There's different add-ons, so the air is not quite too cold, as cold as it might be when it's -30 without tempering. There's an awful lot of options that can be made, but with a heat recovery ventilator, and you can ensure that the air in your home or building is healthful. And that's a big deal, and especially when we have everything buttoned up in the winter in this climate, that we're not breathing things that we don't want to breathe.
Thanks, Kim. We have a couple more questions in the chat right now.
Okay.
So someone is wondering for some clarification. When discussing windows, it was said vinyl was okay, but did I hear that wood is best, then fiberglass, then vinyl in terms of quality?
So I probably didn't finish that comment. So vinyl windows are the least expensive. And sometimes people call them polyvinyl, but that just means that they're vinyl. There's nothing really special about vinyl windows, except that some might last a little longer. But anybody who has had any experience of plastics exposed to sun over any period of time knows what happens. It dries out and it cracks. Vinyl windows are not going to last as long as a wood window will. So wood metal clad that's built really well will last 100 years or more. And a vinyl window, probably its lifetime is limits out at 40 years, very likely, and it will need to be replaced. That's part of the thinking of longevity of the money or the effort that you're putting into a building. That's something that comes into play. Fiberglass windows are in between both of those options. Fiberglass windows look like vinyl windows, but they are stronger. They can be bigger than vinyl windows without steel in them. They can span big distances. The frames are not necessarily as well insulated as some of the wood, higher end wood windows are. And every wood window is not the same. So the higher end wood windows have insulation layers inserted into the wood, and the better fiberglass and better vinyl windows will also have some insulation included in the frames themselves, and that makes them perform better. But fiberglass windows expand and contract at the same as glass, because there's glass in them. So that helps to make them more efficient. The frames also are quite a bit thinner for fiberglass windows. With windows, the best performing part of the window it's counterintuitive, but it's the glass. The glass itself is far more energy efficient than the frame every time. So the fatter the frame, the less glass you have, and that means that you're not getting the same kind of benefits that you would have if you had an entire piece of glass in the hole. There is a window supplier that's supplying windows that don't have any frames, which seems kind of clever, but you still have to hold it up somehow. So there's still wood around it. So there's still some sort of frame around it. And these all come into calculations that we do with energy modeling. And I've been doing energy modeling a long time. I'm always surprised at how something performs every day. I think I know something. I'm proven wrong just because of the configuration and size, location of an element of the building, including the windows. I went off on a tangent. I understand it. All the question was about vinyl. Are vinyl windows okay? They're okay. They're less expensive. They're not a bad choice. I don't want to make it sound like they're a bad choice. They just will not last as long as other options do.
Thanks, Kim. That was really useful. Couple more questions. Circling back to the door blower test process, could you just explain that again? So
you will through that portal that through NRCan and through the portal for the Greener Home Grant, you will give them a bunch of information about your house and where you are, and select a service provider. That service provider will contact you and and make an arrangement for somebody to come to your home, and they'll be there for 2 to 3 hours. They will measure up your house, measure up all of your windows, and they will install what looks like a tent in one of your doors, and it has a big fan in it, and they'll suck all the air out of the house and figure out what kind of air leakage is happening in your home. They'll take notes about all of the mechanical equipment and anything else that might be going on in the house that has anything to do with energy efficiency. They go back to their office, they put all of that into forms, and then they upload that to the portal, and the recommendations will come up in that portal for what is the best approach for what you should be doing in your home.
Great. One more question, going back to the windows. Mm-hmm. There's a question saying, don't wood windows require a lot more maintenance to the frames over time?
Good question. And the answer is, it depends. So some windows, some of the better wood windows have metal cladding on the outside. Metal cladding does not want to be adhered to the wood, by the way. It wants to have standoffs, but it protects the wood on the outside if it's done properly. And on the inside, some window manufacturers have wood exposed, but most of them will have a pre-finished product. And often that's paint, and it's a color of some sort that is a factory applied finish. And when it's a factory applied finish, that will be a pretty long lasting finish. So does that need to be refinished sometime? Probably in 20, 25 years, it will need to be refinished. Will those windows last a long time? They'll last a very long time. That kind of window.
Great. One more question. Does a good door make a big difference, or is it
huge?
more...
Yes, it's a huge. Yeah. So a really good door costs so much money. Like a really good front door will cost $4,000 plus. And is it worth it? It really is a big deal, because that kind of door, when you close it, it will come with a proprietary handle. So you just close the handle and it latches in place. So all the way along the latching end, 4 little prongs pop out into the frame and close that door so it's tight. That's without locking it. And once you lock it, then those are closed even tighter. So the door is completely airtight when it's closed. Less expensive doors inevitably do not seal very well. The seals come off. I'm sure everybody's had that experience where the sweep on the bottom of the door starts to be shredded and it comes to pieces and you have to replace it. Those efforts to making a door perform better are okay, but they're not as good as a very good door. So if $4,000 really eats into your $5,000 budget, and you'll only get paid $250 for it, but it can make a huge difference to the energy efficiency of the home.
Great. And there's just a second part to that question asking if it's possible to have energy efficient sliding doors.
It is. And they also are very expensive. So what they're called is a lift and slide. So in order to disengage them, they lift up. So the handle, you turn the handle and the handle lifts the door up and it slides just with the touch of a finger, it slides. And then when it's closed and you engage it, it's airtight. Those are the only ones, that's the only kind of sliding glass door that is very energy efficient. So, and they come in huge sizes as well. They are amazing, and they can come in vinyl and they can come in wood window types as well. A swinging door often is your better choice in terms of budget, and but those types of sliding doors can be just as airtight as a swinging door.
Awesome. There's more questions rolling in. I just want to take this moment to say, if anybody wants to just jump in and ask a question, you're more than welcome.
Can. Yes.
Or I can continue reading them out as well. But just to remind you of that. So the next one here is, are there any incentives for condo buildings or condo corporations? How could condo dwellers make greener choices?
What a good question. So a condo building can indeed be eligible for the Greener Home Grant, but it has to be the right size. So it can be more than 3 stories high, and it can't be more than 6,000 square feet. So if anybody here knows anything about the building code, it's about Part 9 buildings. So that means that they're reasonably small. Under 6,000 square feet is a pretty small building, but some small walk-ups could be eligible for the Greener Home Grant. Other than that, there isn't anything, unfortunately. It's also a little bit complicated when applying for the Greener Home Grant with a smaller building in a condo situation, because what has to happen is that everybody in the building has to apply for the Greener Home Grant. So there has to be some cooperation. In a small building like that, there'd be something like six units, and that might not be so difficult to do. And then the whole building is assessed, and then everybody applies for the Greener Home Grant individually. It's a little bit complicated.
Right on. There's a nice long comment in the chat as well. I'm not sure if you had a question there. But sounds like a participant had a blower test done to their old home in Calgary.
Okay.
Yeah.
And
And so,
I'll have a look. Okay. And
Brenda, did you have a question with that as well?
I found that the newspaper insulation, when I removed some shiplap. This is a great story. So Brenda, do you want to talk about your experience? Okay. Can Brenda? Oh, okay. Okay. Geraldine's asking which door is a good choice. So if you're just looking for a swinging door, a fiberglass door is almost always a better choice. Wood doors, well, some of the higher end wood doors are not really wood. They're wood veneer on the outside, and there's a lot of insulation in between. So I shouldn't say that a wood door isn't a good choice. But for the most part, fiberglass doors are a better choice. Metal clad insulated doors are probably the worst choice, but they are the easiest to find and the least expensive. But if your budget says that that's all that you can afford, then what you need to do is add more air sealing parts to the doors. So that's adding a better sweep, making sure that it's sealing really well against the frame, and ensuring that the lock sets that you have are engaged well. And that's if that's the best you can do, that's the best that a person can do with their budget. It's and if the money needs to go somewhere else in terms of a building envelope, then that's the way it is. But fiberglass doors tend to not warp as much as wood doors, solid wood doors would. And vinyl doors can get kind of warpy as well if they're not built properly with steel reinforcement.
Great. Looks like Andreas has a question. Do you want to jump in now?
Yeah, and sorry if you've mentioned this before, I had to jump out for a few minutes, but thanks for the presentation. I had a question, like I'm a numbers person, so when
Okay.
someone tells me $4,000 for a door, that seems really expensive to me. But I wonder if you were to kind of give people an idea of what would be your top three kind of easy peasy, high, like quick repayment type of things to do in the home, what would those be?
So repayment in terms of money saved, or repayment in making your home more comfortable and healthful, and those shouldn't be separated. That's where I stand on making the decisions. So if you're trying to save energy, replacing windows and air sealing, that really is the way to go, and to improve. If you can't spend the money on the door, to improve the doors that you have, just make them make sure that the sweeps on the bottom are actually working, and making sure that the sides of the doors are sealed well. That's the best way to approach energy efficiency in any renovation. Air sealing doesn't take very much, and doing the door blower test is so helpful in understanding where the real leaks are and where the breaches are. So sometimes that's a surprise. Sometimes it's a surprise because you think something is more leaky than it is. And sometimes it's a surprise that a leak is happening where you didn't think it would be. But a lot of times that's holes in the wall. It's where the dryer vent is. It's where somebody's drilled a random hole in the wall to throw a cable through the wall. Some of those things end up being the leaky parts of your house that are easy to seal. Does that help, Andreas?
Yeah, thank you. What I'm getting is air sealing. So that
it's the cheapest thing you can do. And okay, whether you're going to actually see any difference in your energy bill, I think switching out your refrigerator to a newer refrigerator is going to you're really going to see that in your electric bill. But in terms of a building renovation, until you do a whole lot of serious stuff, you're not going to see a lot of difference in the cost of energy. It's going to be in comfort.
Okay, no, that's awesome. Thanks. And
Yeah.
maybe is there any other? Just maybe I'm just gonna throw one more because
Sure.
one of the things that we get a lot is, are there any programs or what is that? Like we know of the Greener Homes grant, and now they've added the finance option. Can you are you able to comment do you in your view, is that running really well? Have you heard any success stories of individuals that have been able to run through the whole thing?
It's really just starting up. And even I've had some glitches in my application. So the service provider didn't click on the right button. So for months I was writing to the NRCan to say, or the administrators for the Greener Home Grant, who ended up sending my messages up to NRCan because they couldn't figure out what was wrong. I couldn't access the grant. I couldn't access the portal for even applying for it. And it turned out that the service provider just hadn't pressed the right button. So there are glitches. It's been overwhelmed. That whole system's been overwhelmed over the past year. But I have heard of people finally getting money, and so that they can get started on their projects. So that is happening. But it has been a very successful program. It's really hard to find people to do the assessment of your home. There aren't enough energy analysts out there that are trained to do this work. I'd say by mid next year, this will be moving much more smoothly.
Thank you.
I would kind of jump in here because I've gone through this process here with the energy audit and all that. So one thing here, some neighbors, something to be careful of is to make sure you get that energy audit done before you do any renovation, because the government will not pay you that grant. You have to have that energy audit done first. Right?
And you have to have applied for the loan. If you want the money from the loan, you have to apply for the loan and be approved before you do any of the work.
Yeah, because my neighbors here, they changed their windows, then they went for the grant, and it was forget it.
Yep.
Right. So yeah, I mean that's just such a terrible thing that they've had happen, right? But
it is. They didn't make that very clear at the beginning, at the outset. It's clear on the website now and clear in the information now, but at the beginning they did not make that clear.
Yeah.
And what they did say at the beginning was that if you have had a certified analyst come within 6 months before the grant was started, then you could piggyback on the recommendations of what the analyst had said. But that was easily misinterpreted at that time as saying you could go ahead, get the analyst to tell you what to do, get started on the work, and then apply for the grant, which was not at all the case. Anyways, that's history at this point. We just have to understand that you really do need the approvals in place before you start the work if you want the money.
For me, I did the company that put the panels on the roof, solar company, they actually lined up the energy audit people for me, is what they did. And so it really happened fast. It was kind of just pow. Right?
Good for them.
And
that's smart.
They so the guys came in, did like what you were talking about with the energy audit. And then once that was done, and then they put the solar panels on, and the guys just came back here the other week, did the follow-up, the energy audit guys.
And they did the door blower test as a follow-up?
Yeah, they do all that again. And now I'm waiting for them to upload onto the Greener Homes grant, that website, their follow-up that this work has been done to this house, and the house gets re-rated and all that stuff for that energy rating thing that they're doing. And what I've been told is, and I've done all my part as far as submitting my bills to the government, and I've been told probably early in the new year I could expect to see the money. back.
Awesome.
So it's like a 3-month plus wait from when you, so to say, put your own money out to get a certain amount back. At least that's my experience. So
it's true. I think with the loan, they will, once you're approved, they will give you some money, and I'm thinking it's about $7,000 thereabouts if you qualify for the whole $40,000. So they will give you about $7,000 upfront.
yeah, the solar salesman guy that I worked with, he said people that are going for the loans,
Yes.
he said that's just a mess. He says,
yeah.
like for myself, because I used my own money.
Yep.
You know, that the 3-month wait to get refunded for what I'll get refunded. But he said if you're going for a loan, he said it's really messy for being backed up.
Yeah, that's my understanding. Yeah, I bet by middle of next year it'll be much smoother. But he's right. Yeah.
Great questions, everyone. And we're nearing the end of our scheduled session. I'm happy to keep it open a little bit longer if people have some more questions. Anybody wants to put one in the chat or jump in here?
Sorry, Ali, I don't have a question, but I just wanted to give maybe just I haven't looked really deeply into them, but if there's any M&A citizens on the line here, that we did get an email a couple of days ago that some housing programs, so that Métis citizens can apply through Métis Housing are launched, and I think they have a home repair program out of that. So definitely I would look at that one. I don't know if they would cover some of the efficiency work, but who knows? Maybe there's a source of there that's a little bit separate than the Greener Homes one, right?
For sure. Yeah. Thank you for bringing that up. I think, yeah, that's a great thing to look into. Jen just shared our follow-up survey in the chat again. If anybody has a chance to do that, that would be great. I know we're so happy to have Kim share today and provide knowledge. I know I learned a lot. And so, yeah, thank you on behalf of the M&A. It's great to have you. And maybe I'll just leave it open a couple more minutes if anybody has any follow-up questions. But at this time, I'll just stop the recording.